Chapter 7, The Wanderers. The wanderers she wondered whether it was by accident or perhaps by fate. Days of wandering had thinned her frame and left her voice hoarse from silence. When she crested a ridge, smoke coiled into the sky, thin, fragile, human. Her face instinct was fear. Settlement hunters, perhaps, come to drag her back, all the way back to the line. But as she crouched low and crept forward, she saw not soldiers, but to her bewilderment, wanderers, men and women and children, which put her at ease, as their faces carried none of the rigid hollowness that she had known from the life past. They were laughing. The sound startled her more than any threat could have. Laughter, the full kind, unrestrained, spilling into the air as though the world were not carved by walls and chains. She watched as women stirred a pot over the fire, a boy chased a dog between tents, and a man turned a crude, stingent instrument until it hummed the sound of music into the night sky. The sight was both alien and magnetic. For the first time, she glimpsed into a life not measured by doctrine but by choice. Her approach, although was cautious, it was intriguing. Branches snapped, turned toward the bridge, bodies tense. She froze, heart pounding, until a figure raised a hand, not in threat, but one of a greeting gesture. The gesture disarmed her more than any drawn blade could have. Still, suspicion lingered in their eyes as she descended into their circle. Questions met her before food, before water. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was her dress so plain, her hair so tightly bound? Her eyes shadowed with fear. She answered little, but they understood enough. The scar on her palm told its own story. Rumors spread, a fugitive, a runaway, a girl from behind the walls. Some argued that she should be sent away, fearing that the settlement's wrath would reach them because they would follow. They had to. They must. She was one of their own. Others, more curious than afraid, urged caution but not rejection. They gave her water first, cool, clear, drawn from a nearby stream. She drank until her throat no longer burned. The food, roots roasted over flame, meat tough but filling, more delicious. With every bite, felt like defiance. Every swallow felt like proof that she was no longer bound. She ate while they watched her, their silence heavy, with questions unasked in their eyes, upon their tongue. The leader was an older woman, with hair braided in silver threads. Her eyes held storms, but her voice was steady. "You carry the mark," she said, gesturing towards the scar on her palm. "But you also carry the fire. That is harder to hide, but also harder to see." The words unsettled her, yet also confronted her. Someone had seen her for more than a vessel, more than a fugitive. Someone had actually seen her flame inside of her. Integration was slow, but it was coming. She learned their ways by watching how they pitched tents quickly, how they moved with the land rather than against it, how they trusted one another with silence as much as with words, but suspicion remained for her. Children stared, although they were kind, warm, as a child is, curious, unbecoming, unannounced, loving, some with awe, others with fear. Men muttered that she might bring ruin. Women debated whether to shield her or cast her out, knowing that they too were women. Each night she slept lightly, ready to flee. Her trust fractured. Yet, with every passing day, she absorbed their rhythm. She learned to forge with them, to sew rough garments, to listen to the stories told around the fire. Their stories were not written as if scriptures binding them, but there were memories of survival, of loss, of joy, pain, glory. Some spoke of settlements they had fled, others of families torn apart, In their words, she found both kinship and warning. Freedom was fragile, always haunted, always a risk. Her place among them was never secure, but slowly it became real. When she laughed for the first time, truly laughed, the boy with the dog laughed louder. When she sang softly one night, the man with the instrument played along. Suspicion dulled, replaced by tentative acceptance. Still, she knew belonging was a gift, not a guarantee, and she vowed to protect it, even if it meant carrying her fire into the dark once more. The Wanderer's camp revealed itself fragments, each detail drawn out by the flicker of laughter, by the flicker of firelight. Children ran between the tents, carrying joy with them that seemed both reckless and defiant, as though the sound of itself was an act of survival. She noticed the careful balance of roles. Some prepared food, others were mending tools, while the eldest told stories that drifted across the night like smoke, so the youngest one could retell it in their old age. Every gesture carried weight, a rhythm born of necessity rather than doctrine. At first she stood apart, weary, her body taut with the memory of commands barked at her in that settlement. But the wanderers eventually welcomed her, seeing much of themselves in her, with an ease that felt almost dangerous because kindness, she realized, required trust. But the second evening she was asked to share her story, a story that words struck into her throat, but she offered fragments, her silence, her refusal, her flight. The listeners nodded as if each word was a threat they could recognize and weave into their own world, to their own story, from their past to what became their present, a gift. She watched them batter songs for bread, jokes for comfort, stories of warmth. In this exchange she saw a form of wealth the doctrine had denied, the abundance of shared voices. The landscape around their encampment was harsh, but they carved belonging from it. She studied the way they read the wind, the soil, the clouds, transforming signs of danger into patterns of survival. Alone, she had felt the wilderness as enemy. Among them, she glimpsed it as a teacher, though one that demanded respect. Evenings stretched into lessons. She learned how to tie knots from the held against the storms, how to strike sparks from flint, how to recognize edible herbs by the veins of their leaves. Each skill built a sense of power within her. Although fragile, she was born anew yet holy, to make herself her own. And still at night she lay awake beneath the canvas of borrowed shelter, torn between fear of betrayal and the quiet ache of belonging she dared not name. But by the third night, the rhythm of their voices wove into the dreams, her dreams. For the first time in memory, she slept without clutching her scarred palm to her chest. The fire's glow painted her face in warmth rather than in shadow, and their air no longer smelt of doctrine but of earth, wood, and smoke. Still, she knew belonging here would always carry risk. The settlement's reach was long, and her presence a danger that they had not asked for. Yet when morning came and the camp stirred with song and laughter, she felt something new take root inside her. Not just survival, not just defiance. This time it was a bit more fragile seed of a home. She looked at the boy with the dog, the woman with the silver hair thread, the man with the stringent instrument, and she realized she was no longer wandering alone. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe that fire could be shared, not just by herself, but also could be guarded. Her flame, amongst others. She pressed her palm against the earth, scar meeting soil, and whispered, "If I must carry on my fire into the dark again, I will carry theirs too." They had accepted her, but she knew the time had come. The vow settled into her bones as the sun climbed. Ahead lay dangers she could not yet name, but for now, she had found a circle of warmth against the cold, against the misery, against the past. But it was only for a time like now.